ask you what the worst horror movie sequels of all time were, you'd probably shout a few different options my way. There's Halloween Resurrection, Jaws 3D, which, yes, believe it or not, is worse than Jaws the Revenge, Blair Witch 2 maybe? Either way, there's a whole smorgasbord of bad horror movie follow-ups to beloved classics. But the granddaddy of the bad horror movie sequel? Well, that's gotta be Exorcist II: The Heretic. One of those rare cases of a horror movie follow-up being made by people that actively hated the original, Exorcist II: The Heretic has gone down in movie folklore as the bomb to end all bombs. A bizarre, tonally jarring hodgepodge that shared barely any continuity with its predecessor and was ushered into production without the involvement of the original author, William Peter Blatty. It was, for lack of a better phrase, a huge stinker, with the hate for the film being so bad that, in one anecdote, William Friedkin recalled that the film's producers were chased out of a theater by angry cinema-goers. That's just a really hilarious image no matter which way you cut it, and you should absolutely go check out the video where Friedkin discusses it because, man, what a guy. Dearly missed. And yet, despite all the hate for the film, the consensus that, as Exorcist movie guy Mark Kermode put it, it was, quote, clearly the worst film ever made by anyone ever, which, Jesus, Mark, the movie still isn't without its fans. In fact, as an upcoming documentary that's premiered at this year's Venice Film Festival supposes, said consensus may have actually overshadowed the fascinating ingredients that went into its production. Hey everyone, Ewan for What Culture Horror here again, and a huge caveat first. I am a huge Exorcist guy. Love the Billy Friedkin original, and I adore both of Blatty's novels and his perennially underrated and sadly studio interfered with classic The Exorcist III: Legion. And also, speaking of that movie, there is a big editorial on What Culture Horror that I did the other year talking about why it's so good, which you should go watch. But anyway, Exorcist II. I have not seen this film, and until today, I can't say I ever really had plans to. But then I came across this lovely little piece on the movie in The Guardian written by Jeffrey McNabb. Well, it's less about the movie and more about a documentary that has been made about the movie, which is premiering at Venice, which not only makes the case for the film to be judged on its own merits rather than that of its predecessors, but also that, quite possibly, it may actually be great. And look, the road to reappraisal can be long and arduous for a whole lot of movies, and the narrativization of consensus has a big part to play in that. That goes double for the collapse of the American New Wave in the late 1970s, where auteur-driven bombs like Friedkin's Sorcerer and Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate led to the safer, studio-controlled environment of the 1980s, where the Lucases and Spielbergs were able to thrive and big franchise tentpoles became the norm. Sorcerer and Heaven's Gate are both revered today, especially the former, which is another Friedkin masterpiece everyone needs to watch, so go do that if you haven't already. But at the same time, they were once lambasted as examples of ego-driven excess that necessitated a tightening of the creative reins in the following decade. As this documentary, Borman and the Devil, directed by David Kittredge, supposes, Heretic also fits within this canon, directed as it was by a new wave auteur like John Borman, and it being so creatively off the rails despite its intended function as a blockbuster sequel to one of the 70s most successful films, both in terms of critical success and box office draw. And honestly, on that point alone, regardless of your own thoughts on Exorcist II, which I know has its fans, I find this super compelling. Borman was one of the most impressive filmmakers to come out of the 1960s. He directed the Lee Marvin starring Point Blank, which is one of my favorite films ever made, and also possibly the defining piece of 70s introspection with Deliverance, which, apart from the whole really cool dueling banjos bit with the it's a movie that's basically about everything. It is a true masterpiece up there with the likes of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in terms of how it captures that era. But yeah, Borman followed that up with the likes of Excalibur and Hope and Glory, but the director admits in the documentary that Exorcist II left, quote, an old wound, renowned as it was for, well, all the crazy locust stuff and other such malarkey. At the same time, a reviled Boorman film is a Boorman film nonetheless, and reading McNabb's write-up has accelerated my own plans to check out Heretic and also Kittredge's documentary too. The doc signposts Powell and Pressburger's Black Narcissus as a key influence on the film, which is always a good sign, whilst also highlighting its many technical merits. On top of Boorman's direction, Kittredge's documentary also sings the praises of Garrett Brown's Steadicam abilities and a score from the legendary maestro Ennio Morricone. There's also a sympathetic eye cast towards the intentions of the sequel, which, while I think totally misinterprets the nature and message of its predecessor, is a conversation that's absolutely worth having. As Friedkin himself once said, you take out of The Exorcist what you bring to it. That's part of its magic. That it repulsed more than inspired Boorman is a natural feature of the film, but it's also probably what made him an unideal candidate to build on its legacy, which seems to be the conclusion that the doc also reaches, that maybe Heretic, if it was just another horror movie with no ties to The Exorcist, will be looked upon today more fondly, if not for the baggage of being a sequel. So yeah, ultimately, was it a good idea to make an Exorcist sequel without William Peter Blatty being around, given how uniquely him the original was? No, to be honest, this was a terrible idea all around, but it was admirable. And also, you know, inherently, there is something really interesting about John Boorman getting to make an Exorcist movie with Richard Burton and James Earl Jones, and it failing so spectacularly in the process. Like, if you're gonna make a movie that's gonna divide audiences, do it by going whole hog with flying locusts and two of the 20th century's greatest performers, because there's no half measures here. We're not in half measure country anymore. We need to go full measure, whole hog, pure ridiculousness, and I guess that's what Heretic provides. I also just love it when people go and bat for movies with bad reputations. You might get the occasional ridiculousness where someone tries to tell you that the 2005 Willy Wonka movie is good. Sorry for anyone who's just caught strays there, but I feel like this is where a lot of the best film criticism tends to come from nowadays. People diving into cinema they consider to be overlooked and bringing a unique, potentially corrective contribution to the fore. That's something we, as horror fans, should be super familiar with, especially if we're talking about the filmography of like John Carpenter or those horror sequels whose filmic qualities were downplayed by mainstream criticism. Either way, as the Guardian piece notes, Kittredge has been working on this bad boy for about 7 years now, which is the kind of dedication and commitment that leads to something really energizing and worthwhile. So yeah, I guess I'll be watching Exorcist II: The Heretic sooner than I ever expected, as well as this documentary too, which currently does not have a wide release date annoyingly, but should get one once Venice wraps up later this week. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below too, and across social media. Are you a noted Exorcist II hater, or have you been on the wronged cult classic train for a while now? Post your thoughts down there, let us know the crack, and if you enjoyed the vid, why not hitch a ride on your nearest flying locust, and give us a like and subscribe. And also check out the Exorcist III video, because I love that movie and could watch it over and over and over again. That's everything though. Thanks for watching. I'm Ewan, this is What Culture Horror, and I will catch you next time. Bye!